A very warm welcome to all the students of Thakur Vidya Mandir High School and Junior College. Keeping up with our motto, let learning be a joy and teaching a pleasure. Here we are with remote teaching and learning process to bridge the gap. Happy learning, students! A warm welcome to all the students of Standard 9. Today we are going to study a new topic in English, prose topic. Before we lead towards our topic that we are studying today, I want you all to observe these pictures very carefully. I hope you all must have at least watched one of this particular movies from Bahubali or Padmavat, Bajirao Mastani, Jodha Akbar. All these movies are giving us a very strong message and also telling us about the various famous leaders, what all incidents had happened across, giving us some kind of message about the struggle, about fights, wars that had lead to a lot of loss of life. These movies are like a historical influence us and tell us what all incidents had happened in the past. This movie also gives us a message about the distraction that is caused during the war. It is also giving us, showing us, telling us about the life that people, the kings, the leaders used to live during the past time. Today, we are going to study one of a epic story in today's prose chapter. So let's get started with a new prose topic that we are studying today, that is the fall of Troy. English Unit 2.4, The Fall of Troy. Hello students, I am Miss Dezal De Silva, teacher of Thakur Vidya Mandir High School and Junior College. Will be teaching all this interesting topic today. So without wasting much of our time, let's get started. Unit 2.4, The Fall of Troy. If you all have your English textbook, please open page number 40. Let's begin. Epics are long poems that relate the deeds of a great national hero or a great national war. So the exact meaning of epics are like long poems, okay, which talks about, which tells us about the great deeds, the great works that are done by the great national hero or the great national wars. So about great leaders, great heroes, about them in the books of epics, the good deeds of all those people are mentioned. They often tell of a national early history. So basically in the epics, all the early history is written, is mentioned so that our generation people are well aware about the incidents that happened in the past. They may be composed or sung or recited for many years before they are actually written it down. So during the past times, this particular epics, which are like long poems, they were first sung, they were recited, and then later they were actually written down in this book so that people like us, the next generation, can read those books and can get to know what all incidents had happened during the past times. The two famous Sanskrit epics are the Ramayana and the Mahabharatas, and the two great epics of European literature written in ancient Greek are the Iliad and the Odysseys. So, as we are well aware about the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, similarly, the European literature written in the ancient Greece, they are well aware about the Iliad and the Odysseys epic literature. So just as Indian literature, we go back to the stories from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. So in the literature of the Western countries, they go back to the Iliad and the Odysseys. So whenever, if you ask any of the Western countries friends, they won't be so aware about the stories of Ramayana and the Mahabharata. They will be well aware about the stories of the Iliad and the Odysseys. So if you ask any of the Indian people about the Iliad and the Odysseys, they won't be sure what exactly that particular epic is all about, as we are well aware about the Ramayans and the Mahabharatas. Similarly, the Western countries, they are well aware about this Iliad and the Odysseys epic stories. They won't be so famous about, they won't be so aware about the Ramayans and the Mahabharatas. Just as just as children all over India know the names of the stories of Ram and Sita, Yudhishthira and Arjun and Draupadi. So the children in the Western countries know the names of Hector or Odysseus and Achilles and the Helen of Troy, the most beautiful woman in the world, because of whom the Greek and the Trojans fought for 10 long years. So as Indian people, they were well aware about the names of the stories like Ram, Sita, Arjun, Draupadi, and all these people, all these epic leaders. They must be well known about who exactly is Ram and Sita. Similarly, the Western countries know the names such as Hector, Odysseus. Then we have Achilles and Helen of Troy. Now, this particular woman, Helen of Troy, she was the most beautiful woman in the world, and because of whom the Greek and the Trojans, okay, Trojans is a city. So because of that particular beautiful woman, the Greek and the Trojans, they fought for like 10 long years. Okay, so today we are going to study a particular lesson related to this topic only. So as we are aware about the Mahabharatas and the Ramayana, similarly the Western countries are more well aware about the epics of the Iliads and the Odysseys. So here is a picture of Ramayana and Mahabharata. I know you all are well aware about these particular stories. Just to add on with the story of Ramayana, it is a ancient Sanskrit epic story which follows Prince Ram, who tries to rescue his beloved wife Sita, which was from the clutches of Ravan, with the help of an army of monkeys. So that is what story was there in Ramayana. Whereas in Mahabharata, it is also an ancient Indian epic story which involves around two branches of family, the Pandyas, and all the wars that were happening, all the battles that took place, and the loss of people that died with a philosophical discourse. So we see that these two different stories are different, and we see that it is giving us some kind of message, and we are well aware about this particular Sanskrit epic stories. So as we are well aware about the Sanskrit epics about Ramayana and Mahabharata, Ram and Sita, the characters' name, here are the Western countries' characters, the epic characters like Hector, Odysseus, then Achilles, and this beautiful woman Helen of Troy. Because of her, there was a great fight between the Greek and the Trojans for about 10 years, and we are going to study that today. So let's move ahead. Nobody knows for certain who the author of these early epics is. It is thought that they arose and developed with the nation itself and were handed down from singer to singer till perhaps one great poet gave them their final form. So we exactly don't know who is the actual author of this particular stories, the particular epics, and throughout, all can see generation after generation, they were handed over and over and over till the last final great poet who gave that particular epic long poem a final touch, where he noted down in the book so that people over the generations can read and can go through it. It is believed that the Iliad and the Odysseys were composed with a recited by a blind poet named Homer, who lived about 900 BCE and who wandered from one great city or village to another, singing his poems to all who could receive him in their homes and give him hospitality. So, as I've mentioned earlier, that the Western countries were very much familiar with the epic stories of the Iliad and the Odysseys, and we get to know that this particular epic was composed by a blind poet named Homer, who lived about 900 BCE and who wandered in great cities or a village from to another, singing his poems to all the people who were sick, who were homeless, and giving them, who can give him hospitality, so that he can even stay there and he can also recite the poems and tell them about all these epic stories that he were well aware about is. This wandering singers has been honored through the ages, not only in Greece but in all European, as the father of the European poetry. So this particular uh, poet named Homer, he was honored through ages, not only in Greece but in all Europe as the father of the European poetry. So he was not only famous in Greece but also in Europe as the father of the European poetry. The Iliad is the story of Ilium or Troy, a rich trading city in the Asian Minor near the narrow sea that leads from the Aegean to the Black Sea. It was well situated both from commerce and agriculture. So now this particular this particular epic, the Iliad, so it is a story of Troy or Ilium, that particular city. Now Troy is a city, okay, that particular city was very rich in trading in the Asian Minor. So Asian Minor is located near the western of Asia, and it is compromising mostly the present Turkey. So this particular city Troy is presently in Turkey. So the background, the area is been described over here. It is telling us about, it is near the narrow sea that leads the Aegean to the Black Sea. It is well situated both for commerce and agriculture. So it is, that particular area is it is well suited for commerce and agriculture, the city of Troy. In front of the city was the sea over which sailed the ships of Troy carrying goods and grain. So that particular city of Troy was very wealthy, and it was sailing a lot of ships of carrying goods from one place to another. At the back rows, that means the backside, the high peak of Mount Ida, from which flowed many rivers and streams. So just back of Troy, there was Mount Ida, and from that particular Mount Ida, many streams and rivers used to flow. The valleys among the hills were well watered and fertile, with corn growing in the fertile fields and cattle feeding on the rich grass of the meads, while sheep feed on the slopes of the hills. So it is describing the area of the Troy. It is telling us about how beautiful this particular place Troy was. It was very rich in fertile land. It was having ample of water, and because of that water, because of the rivers and valleys, the crops, the fertile area was very good. And because of that particular thing, because of the crops, because of all the fertile land, they used to have this sailing of goods from one place to another. They used to sail their goods, they used to sail their grains, because they were very well known for the fertile land with corn and all these things. And also they were having these cattle with sheep fed on the slopes of the hills. So it is telling us, it is showing us the area, how exactly the Troy city was, which was very beautiful and which was very much good looking. Now, in this particular chapter, prose chapter that we are studying, the fall of Troy. The fall of Troy is an epic story. Okay, the story has just begun. Earlier in the first paragraph, it was telling us about how Indians are well aware about Mahabharatas and Ramayana. Similarly, the Western countries are well aware about all this Helen, Hector, and all these people. So now they are starting with the epic story of this particular Helen Troy, why there was a fight for about 10 years we'll get to know in this particular chapter. Round their cities, the Trojans had built a strong wall so that no enemy should attack them from the sea. So the city of Troy, okay, it was surrounded with this huge security, with building a strong wall so that the opposite country, so that no enemies can even harm them, attack them from the sea, because you all know if any enemy can come from the sea and they can just start attacking. So they built up this huge wall so that no one can attack them. The wall was so broad that the people could stand and sit and walk on it. The great gates stood open and the people could go to the seashore outside and come in as they pleased. So the, now since they were feeling scared that maybe some enemies will harm them, so mostly the gates were used to be closed, and during the certain time only that particular gates were open so that people could go out, they can enjoy the seashore and they can come back. But in the times of war, the gate would be closed. So during the time of wars, the gate would be closed because a lot of danger it could take place, and therefore the gates were closed during the war time. And then the city was like a strong fortress, quite safe from all the attacks, protected by the walls surrounding it as well as by the hills behind. So as I mentioned you all that the Trojans, the city of Trojan, there was sea over there, and because of the sea they were scared that the enemy can come through the seaways and they could harm them. And just behind the city of Trojan there was a huge hills over there, and even from them there also they were quite scared that even from there enemies can come and they can harm them. So therefore they were having a lot of security and they were protected by the walls. And during the wars the gates of that particular city used to be closed, the city of Troy. Thus, Troy was a strong city, strongly protected by its walls and strongly defended by its brave soldiers. So, the Troy city was having these brave soldiers to protect the kings and all this thing. So, and therefore, even the walls were solely strongly built that the attack, even if there would be some kind of attack, the people would be safe over there. But all the kings and the heroes of the Greece had declared war against the Trojans. So even though there was this strong and protected walls and brave soldiers, still we see that the king and the heroes of Greece, they had declared a war against the Trojans because Paris, a prince of Troy, had persuaded Helen, wife of Greek king Menelaus, to elope with him. So the Trojans had taken Helen, the woman, as I've mentioned earlier, they have taken this beautiful woman and in the Trojan city, and therefore the king, the Greek king, he was very angry on the city of Troy, and therefore because of that particular thing, because of that particular woman, we see that war was been declared on the Trojans. He had brought her to Troy. The Greek wanted to take revenge on Troy for the wrong done to Menelaus. So the Greek people, they wanted to take a revenge on Troy because Troy had brought his wife, the king's wife, towards him, and therefore they were having this war. They sailed to the Troy and laid siege to the city. The Trojans too fought hard, and the siege continued for 10 long years. So both the cities, Greek and the Trojan, were fighting for that Helen, for that particular woman, and this particular fight lasted for 10 long years. The fighting went on daily, but the siege did not end. That means that the fighting was continuously, it was unstoppable. Okay, it was unstoppable, and they were just fighting. They were not thinking at all about the bloodshed that was happening. They were not aware about the loss of life, nothing. They were so much into the fights. Okay, in that fortified walls, they were so much trying to kill each other. On the other hand, the Greek could not take the city, and on the other, the Trojans could not force them to sail away. That means that the Greeks, they were not allowed, okay, they were not allowed to come inside the walls, come inside the Trojan city, okay. They were not allowed to conquer, they were not allowed to come into the Trojan city. And on the other hand, the Trojans could not do anything to take them out, because they thought that if they go out and have an attack, all people might die. And therefore, we see that even Trojans were helpless, and even the Greek people both were helpless during this time, because the Trojans thought if they go out for a war, they all might die, and therefore they had closed the gates and they were inside the fortified walls. Every day the Trojans came out of their gates and the Greek came out of their tent and ships, and the fight went on. So every day this thing used to happen. They used to go come out, they used to go back again, fight every day for 10 long years. The fighting went on. Sometimes there were great battles between the two armies. Sometimes there were single fights between two great heroes. Sometimes the Trojans had the better of it, and sometimes the Greek. So sometimes Trojans used to win, sometimes the Greek used to win, sometimes there used to be only battle between two great heroes, sometimes everyone used to fight against each other. So this fight lasted for 10 long years. They were fighting and fighting and fighting. But still the fighting went on. Great heroes on the both sides were killed in the course of the war. After leading the defense of his city for 9 years, the brave Hector was at last killed by the archers. So at last the brave Hector, okay, he was killed by whom? He was killed by the Achilles. Okay, now Achilles was a great brave warrior, and the Achilles killed Hector, whom none would resist. But Achilles himself was killed later on by a poisoned arrow that entered his heel, the only part of his body where he could be wounded. Still later, Paris himself was killed also by a poisoned arrow. The Trojans were tired of being shut up in their city, and the Greeks were longing to see their homes again. But still the fighting went on. So we see that Hector, after defending for like 9 years, the brave Hector was at last killed by the Achilles. Now Achilles was a great warrior of Greece, and then later we see that even Achilles died. He was been killed by this particular arrow, which was a very poisoned arrow which entered his heel. Okay, now you all know what is a heel. Okay, and that particular part of the body was been wounded, but still we see that the fight was on, and still later the Paris himself was killed by also by a poisoned arrow. And we see that the Trojans, they wanted to try to stop all this thing. They wanted peace, and even the Greek people, they wanted to go back home, because for 10 long years they were fighting. They had come to this Trojans, they had come to the city of Trojan, they were fighting, and they wanted to go back home. But still we see they did not want it. They just want to win the battle. They just wanted to they wanted to empty the Trojan city. So this is all in part 1. Next, in my next video we will be discussing about part 2. Let's see whether the beautiful woman Helen, whether she goes back to the Greece, or whether she is still there in the city of Trojan. Let's see in the next part 2 video whether she decides to go back to the city, go back to Greek, or whether she decides to stay in the Trojan city for her entire life. So now in this particular part 1 that we studied about Troy, about the fall in the Troy, we get to know about what actually incident has happened over here. We see because of the Helen Troy, because of this most beautiful woman, there was a fight between the Greek and the Trojans, and how these people were fighting uh, with each other, loss of life, so much of distraction for about 10 years. And we also see that this Trojan city was, they were having brave soldiers. The entire city was being covered with this fortified walls, but still we see that the Greek people were fighting because we see that the Helen Troy, she was in the city of Trojans, and she was the wife of, as I've mentioned earlier, that since she was the wife of the king in that particular city of place of Greece, the king wanted Helen to come back, but now since that Helen is still there in the city of Trojans, the king is so angry on him, on the city of Trojans, just because he wanted his wife back. So we'll see in part 2 whether she comes back or no. Thank you, students. Stay safe, stay healthy. I'll meet you all soon for part 2 of our prose chapter, The Fall of Troy. I hope this particular part 1 is clear. We, we got to see about the fight, the distraction that is caused, and let's see in the second part whether Helen comes back or no. Till then, thank you and stay safe.